77 WABC invites you to a family fun day and softball showdown on July 20th with net proceeds benefiting Shriners Children's. John Sterling will call the game as the FDNY takes on the NYPD with special guests Dwight Gooden, Art Shamsky, 77 WABC hosts, including Sid Rosenberg, Anthony Cumia, Lionel, Dominic Carter, and many more. For more info and to buy tickets, go to ShrinersChildren'sChampions.org. That's ShrinersChildren'sChampions.org.
Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku. And it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
That's right, folks. That's what we all want, right? It's a little bit of money. Money, baby. The issue, of course, of the one of those divine issues is whether money can buy you love. But you can buy a lot with money, and that's why we have this show, so we can tell you how you can make more money. And so appreciate people who are regular listeners listening in. Thank you so much for making this show a success. Our ratings keep getting better because of people like you. So thank you. And so much to talk about today. By the way, I'm so excited about a number of things. One is, I'm just going to say USA, because Coco Gauff has won the French Open. 21-year-old, she's a woman now, but oh my gosh, she played fantastic, beat the number one player in the world. And it is a big, big victory for America. It's the first time an American woman has won the French Open in a long, long time. So I'm feeling really, for those of you who watched the match, it was a fantastic match, 3-setter, and Coco showed a lot of grit and determination and poise. And they even played the Star Spangled Banner when she won, and it was really, really a great thing to watch. I'm a very patriotic guy, and it felt good to see an American back on the stage again. She'll probably be now the number one player in the world. That's cool. And then I'm very happy about what's going on with the economy. You know, we're getting a lot of good news on the economy. 2 months ago when we were on the show, everybody, including myself, was on the ledge. Oh my gosh, I'm going to jump off. The stock market's crashing. The economic news was bad. We had trade wars all over the world. And now, things are just percolating. It's a hot smoking economy right now. Good jobs report, good data on inflation. I think you're going to see the deficit fall because you've got more people working. There's 7 million job openings today in America, 7 million. I think that's close to an all-time high. So jobs are out there for people who want them. I'm tired of the Democrats trashing Trump. You know, whether you like Trump or not. Look, I'm not here to sell you on Trump. Everybody has their own opinions about Donald J. Trump. But so far, so good on the economy. I think we're really recovering from Bidenomics rather quickly. And I know everybody is concerned about this massive amount of debt and the massive deficits we're running, $2 trillion a year. It all began under Biden. But I think we're going to, through economic growth and through prosperity and through some very strategic tax cuts, we're going to get this done, folks. We are going to win, and we're going to see, I think, very strong growth. And by the way, I mentioned this last week, but I want to mention it again. The growth rate for the U.S. economy is now estimated somewhere between 3.5% and 4.5%. It's a big, big number, folks. Really big number. And if we can keep that up, we're going to have the deficit go down, because the more you have economic growth, the more people who are working, the more businesses make profits, the better it is for everyone, and including bringing in more revenue to the government. And when you get more revenue, what happens to the budget deficit? It comes down. Trump is going to help us grow our way out of this. Now, that's not to say that we can't cut spending. We must cut spending, absolutely must cut spending. But what I'm trying to tell you is that I think we're going to see, when we get this big, beautiful bill done, I think we're going to see real prosperity in this country. And I wanted to I wanted to point out to you, for those of you who don't get our hotline, the Unleash Prosperity hotline, get it. Please get it. Please, please, please get this, because it is a great way every morning, and it's free. I'm not selling anything. This is absolutely free, folks. Just go to unleashprosperity.com, click on hotline, and sign up. Give us your email. We'll get it to you for free. I think you'll really like it.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. 77 WABC invites you to a family fun day and softball showdown on July 20th with net proceeds benefiting Shriners Children's. John Sterling will call the game as the FDNY takes on the NYPD with special guests Dwight Gooden, Art Shamsky, 77 WABC hosts including Sid Rosenberg, Anthony Cumia, Lionel, Dominic Carter, and many more. For more info and to buy tickets, go to ShrinersChildren'sChampions.org. That's ShrinersChildren'sChampions.org.
Do is New Mexico, and that has really a lot to do with unleashing federal lands, and that was Donald Trump, freeing up more federal lands in his first term. So we contribute mightily to the economy of the country, and which is why, by the way, the founders created the United States Senate was so that every state with a lot of resources, but not a lot of people, had some equal power in at least one of the two chambers, and that's why we have a Senate.
That's a great explanation for it. The founders were geniuses, weren't they? So
yes, they were.
You used the word hydraulic fracturing, and I bet a lot of our listeners on the East Coast are, fracking, it's a terrible thing. Oh, no, my gosh, it's going to cause the end of the world, and we're going to have earthquakes, and we're going to have pollution, and all of these things. So, will you disabuse the listeners of this show to that idea that fracking is a bad thing? I think it's one of the great innovations of all time.
Well, it definitely is, because we were dealing with peak oil prior to this. And now, instead of being dependent on Saudi Arabia or Russia or, African nations or Venezuela, we're now not just independent, but we can export as well and do. And that was one of the things we did even in the Obama administration, was to free up the ability to export, oil. And that's been a game changer, because now the United States is the price maker, not the price taker in all things oil and gas. And so, and not to mention what it's done for us, Steve, in the areas of national security. I mean, it's being energy secure is as good as being nationally secure.
It's a no-brainer, and you're so right. And I've been so impressed when I've been to, what's the town, Williston? What's the town where they? So
this references the Williston Basin, the traditional basin, and Williston is sort of the heartbeat of the Bakken, no question about it. Yeah.
And so, you also have a lot of other resources. You have some of the best farmland in the world in North Dakota, and you have minerals, right? Coal and other minerals.
Well, we do. We have coal and produce a lot of coal for electricity, cheap, and it's getting cleaner all the time and abundant, but also to minerals. So it's funny you bring that up today, because just earlier this week, we were out we being Senator John Hoeven, Governor Kelly Armstrong, and Congresswoman Julie Fedorchak. We only have one, as you know. And we were all.
You have more senators than congressmen.
We have, I used to always say, I don't know why it takes two senators to do one person's job, but anyway, it takes 36 at least or so in Texas. But that said, we've just witnessed the signing of a deal between a now retired coal mine called Westmoreland Coal. They've used up all the coal, and they're reclaiming all the land. And their facility, they signed an agreement with a company called Talon Metals. They mine the taconite, which is made largely of nickel and copper in Minnesota, and they're going to process that into, obviously a finished product, but also extract the critical minerals, because as you can imagine, there's a lot of critical minerals even in the coal, and in the now burned coal, the coal ash, as they call it, or residuals, has a lot of those minerals, and so they're going to be extracting some of those critical minerals right here in North Dakota.
That's awesome. We've done a study at Unleashed Prosperity. That's the group, as you know, Senator, that Art Laffer and Steve Forbes and I started with Larry Kudlow many years ago. But we have a new study by one of the top geologists in the country who estimates are you ready for this? Are you sitting down, Senator? $12 trillion. $12 trillion of mineral resources in this country that we've not been able to go after, mostly because of environmentalists. But that's a huge treasure chest. And think of all the federal money that we could bring in terms of tax dollars if we were to go after this stuff.
Well, particularly particularly, and add to that, if some of it's on federal land, and I know some of it is under federal land, if you allow that mining, those are our assets. Those are the taxpayers' assets. We should be getting the tax benefit from that and the revenue benefits from that. And with modern technologies, Steve, you create a lot of great jobs, obviously, and a lot of wealth, and that creates a lot of tax revenue. But you also have, with modern technologies, ways to do it much cleaner. And I guarantee you, if we do that, we will produce those critical minerals in a much more environmentally friendly way than anybody else we're buying them from today.
I agree.
We won't even use slave labor.
So we only have about 3 minutes left, Senator, so I appreciate so much you coming on. This is Senator Cramer of the great state of North Dakota. I want your take on the big, beautiful. And we turn to the Senate. I guess when you guys, you get back in town on Tuesday? Is that when you come back?
Monday. We'll be in Monday.
Monday, okay. So now we go down to the home stretch. I would love it if Donald Trump had a bill on his desk to sign on the 4th of July. I would love that. But I know you're one of the strong conservatives who wants more cuts, and I want to see more cuts, but we got to get this thing done. Is there a path to victory here?
I believe there is, Steve. First thing I think what we have to do is, as conservatives, pro-growth conservatives, is understand that however they score this bill, they being the Congressional Budget Office or others that score it, don't adequately recognize the growth potential with a tax policy like this, right? They always underscore it. We have to, as conservatives, trust it. We're free marketers. We get that. There's that. On the other front, I do think we can find some more savings, but we also need to make sure Mike Johnson always has at least a 1 vote margin to pass the bill out of the House. So that balancing act is what we're all about. I think that Ron Johnson and Rick Scott are right. I think they should scream from the rafters and get as many, get as many conservative principles as possible. But at the end of the day, when it's a binary choice, the only two numbers that matter are 50 and 218. That's the number of people in the House and Senate.
That's right. So you have is it 53 Republicans in the Senate?
It is.
53. Okay. So we've got my friend Rand Paul, I'm going to put him down as a no. So that gives you 52.
Undecided, but you never know.
Yeah.
That's right.
And so you feel good that we can get 50. But by the way, just to explain to our listeners, if you get the 50, then the vice president, J.D. Vance, would cast the tie-breaking vote. So you only need 50, not 51. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. That is right. And it's going to always be hard, just like it was in the House. It looked in the House like the whole thing was going to collapse. And then, of course, you come up on the midnight hour and suddenly you have one more vote than you thought, because that's just in human nature, is that you go to the deadline fighting for everything you can get. It's like a football team. They don't stop playing, in the third quarter. So you're going to see that happening, and it should happen. But I do believe at the end of the day, conservatives of all types, when you look at a binary decision between passing it or not passing it's always going to be better from the conservative perspective.
Yeah, I agree with. Of course, you're right. We have to get this done. So I need you to do me a favor, Senator. We would at our group, and we're running the whole coalition of all the outside groups to try to help you get this thing through. One of the disappointments we like the House bill. I thought the Speaker did a wonderful job of getting that through the House, but we would love to see this 15% corporate rate. That would bring us below Europe and a lot of our other competitive countries. Do you think there's a chance we could get something like that?
I think it's going to be really, really tough.
No, you're supposed to say yes.
I'm for you. I'm with you, brother. I'm with you. But here's what I was going to say. We shouldn't stop at the end of this bill. Even with the big, beautiful bill, we still have 2 more reconciliation opportunities in this very Congress. And I think we have to go back at it. I think get it done. We need a victory. It's going to impact the economy quicker. The quicker we get it done, it's going to, incentivize investment and all of those things that you know so much about. But that doesn't mean we have to stop talking about it.
So I've got an idea for you, and I'm going to run this by you with the last question of the day. So how about we get together and we do this? We open up a lot of these federal lands in states like North Dakota for drilling and mining, and then we have the tax dollars that come in from that, the royalty fees, the leasing fees. I think you could probably raise hundreds of billions of dollars from that, and not just in North Dakota, but around the country, especially in those western states. And we use that money to pay for the 15% corporate rate. What do you think about that?
I think that's fine, but I think you'll have more than that, and we should pay down the debt on some of it.
There you go. Okay, well, Senator Cramer, thank you so much for joining us. That's Kevin Cramer from North Dakota, one of the staunch fiscal conservatives. We don't have enough of them in the Senate. This is the More Money Show, and we'll be right back.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
John, are you there?
I am here. How are you?
Okay, John Catsimatidis, the first question I have to ask you, can money buy you love?
Can money buy you love? Oh, my God. You know, I remember seeing that movie, and the guy said, do you want to have sex? I'll give you $10,000. And she said, no. And she says, I'll give you $100,000. She said, no. And then she says, I'll give you $1 million. Well, she stopped to think about it for a few minutes.
Well, you and Margot have been married. How many years have you guys been married?
We're together 54 years.
What? She's put up with you for that long?
Yes, and she's only 59 years old.
Well, you guys are wonderful people. I love you, John, but I love Margot even more. And I want to come to your, what's the next one? How many years?
We're going to have a 55-year anniversary.
I can't wait. I want to be invited to that party.
We're going to have a WABC gala this year.
Oh, I can't wait. Invite me to that, please. Okay, so I want to get
that WABC is number one in the country, certified by Nielsen.
Oh my God, number one, and you have done so much to build this station up to the powerhouse that it is. So I'm proud and privileged to be part of that. So I want to talk to you, if I may, sir, about the mayoral race. You had made a statement a few weeks ago, I think it was, that if the socialist is elected, that you may have to move some of your businesses out of New York. What do you think? Are you for Cuomo? What are you thinking about this race?
Well, I think that, by the way, I was on at about 10 minutes to 12. I was on Fox talking about the same subject. Yep. And guess who texted me? I was texted the president was watching.
Ah, wow. So what did you say?
What I say is that you cannot have a socialist.
Right.
A 32-year-old socialist that's wet behind the ears become mayor of the city of New York with a $100 billion budget.
Yes,
you cannot have a 32-year-old kid that's to run a $100 billion enterprise. Yeah. And I said with Cuomo, I'm rooting for him to beat that socialist in the primary. Yeah. And then I said that with Eric Adams. I said to Eric Adams, if Albany cannot solve your problems, Washington will.
Right.
So, Tom Homan and President Trump supporting loving New York. Yes. Guess what? And this is what I said on Fox, too, because we got a new sheriff in town, that the criminals in New York City right now are scared that they're going to be caught on the streets in New York. And guess what? You're not going to go to the DA and get out of jail in 2 hours. Mm-hmm. You're going to go straight to Guantanamo, do not pass go, do not collect $200. Mm-hmm. And guess what? The criminals are scared. And that's what it's all about. And it's not Albany that's solving the problems. It's being solved by President Trump, and it's being solved by Tom Homan, who love New York City. And so, that's the way John, enough is enough, Steve.
Well said. By the way, we only have about a minute left before we go to the pains, but I wanted to let you know, I think you know this, that I hail from the great city of Chicago. We essentially did elect a socialist, as gone to crap.
And how many black kids are dying in the streets of Chicago?
Exactly. So this is why you are exactly right, John. Well, John, thanks for allowing me to have the privilege of doing this show. Get back to Margot, take her to the beach or something like that, and we will be right back, folks.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
I had promised that we would get Sean Spicer on. I had Sean on about 6 months ago, and Sean, you were such a big hit. I promised folks I would bring you back because you have so many great insights about this great president that we have today. So first of all, Sean, thanks so much for joining this afternoon.
You're very welcome, Steve. Happy Easter to you and to the audience.
So, you had I was so jealous. You had the greatest job that you had when you worked in 2017 for Donald Trump. And those were those hectic first months of Trump's first term. you got through it and just really, did that job with aplomb. It was just an amazing performance. So just tell us how you think things are going. You know Donald Trump as well as anybody. How do you feel like the second term is going so far, Sean?
It's funny, Steve. First of all, thank you for your kind words. Second, I had a chance to spend some time with him earlier this week in the Oval Office, and he asked me the same question. He said, "How do you think it's going?" And as you know from the time that you spend around him, that's sort of that's how he greets people. How are things going? What do you think?
Right.
And I told him, I said, "Mr. President, I got to admit, I'm a bit jealous." And he started laughing, and I said, "You guys just." He said, he's very kind. He always is. And he said, you guys, you work so hard last night. I said, I know we all worked hard, but I think you guys definitely have it together more. You've been able to think about what you wanted to do and who you wanted on your team. And it shows, I point to the first couple of days when Tom Homan was doing these raids across. They didn't just randomly pick cities. They had really thought through what those first few weeks and months would look like. And the actions that he's taken really reflect that, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's been an amazing, this first 3 months, I think we're coming close to the first 100 days. I think that's coming up very soon. And at least in my lifetime, I don't remember 100 days like this in any president. I don't go all the way back to say FDR that had a famous 100 days, but yeah, it's amazing.
But Steve, I think this is the thing that people aren't giving enough thought to. Is that because he didn't have a back-to-back term, they weren't sequential. And obviously we've only done this once before in our country and never in modern history. They've had time. To my point about my comment to the president,
yes.
When you have 4 years out and you have time to reflect, if I get back, what am I going to do? Who am I going to surround myself? Who am I going to keep away? And what are the processes that we need to follow? That creates the result that we're seeing now. But it's like so many things. If he had just had back-to-back terms, Mark Meadows would have stayed as the chief of staff. And again, nothing's wrong, right? And Kayleigh probably would still be press secretary. But the point is that when you have time to pause and think to yourself, okay, what do I want to do? It's almost like playing chess and having a moment to look at the board and almost a pause in the game and saying, okay, what would I do if I get back, if the game starts again, what are my moves? And Trump has had time to think about that. So I told people, it's not just the people that you want to surround yourself, it's the people that you want to keep away. The first few months of 2017, we had to think about all these people that were new to him, et cetera. And it's a very, very different dynamic than it was then.
Yeah, I think that's so true. That's a really important insight you have there, Sean, because frankly, there were a lot of people who were working in the first, couple of years of the Trump administration who were never Trumpers. And I'm like, well, how did these people get in? Right. These were people, when I was working early in the campaign, we were, and some of these people were my friends. But they were with Cruz or they were with Marco Rubio or other people and were pretty savagely attacking Donald Trump in those days. You recall that. And then all of a sudden they've got a cabinet position or they got a high level position. This time you have true believers in the Trump agenda. And look, I don't agree with everything Donald Trump does. I'm with him 85% of the time. I'm not a big fan of the tariffs, and he's a little mad at me about that. But I love almost everything else he's doing on the economy. But the people today are so loyal to him, and sometimes almost to a fault. But when you were there were a lot of people who were almost on the inside trying to undo what Trump was trying to do.
Yeah, no, that was the problem, is that it was very traditional. So when, Trump, as you know, was not a politician. He hadn't had a cadre of lobbyists and former staffers that could surround him. So people would call him up and say, oh, Mr. President, I know you need an assistant secretary for biofuels at the Department of Energy. And I know a guy, and he'd say, great, put him in. And no one actually thought, are you guys bought in the agenda? This time, they're methodically going through those lists and saying, do you understand the Trump agenda? Do you understand that you're there to implement his agenda, not yours? And it's such a difference. And one of the things that the media gets wrong, Steve, is they say Trump has just surrounded himself with loyalists. I mean, look, a dog can be loyal. It just sits there, right? And my dog is very loyal to me, but it doesn't do anything for me. It's not like it makes it appears on the Sean Spicer show every night or subscribes to my YouTube channel even. But the point is that where they get this wrong, and you noted this a minute ago, is that these folks are implementers. They're disruptors. They are there not just to quote unquote be loyal and sit in the corner and say yay Donald Trump, but to say, okay, what do I do today to advance the America First agenda? And they understand that it's not their agenda that they're putting forward. And that was one of the things that we faced in 2017, where people are saying, I don't think that it's right, or I don't want to do this, as if they had won an election.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's a great insight as well. Donald Trump is someone I've been privileged to get to know and work with briefly. And, he was incredibly loyal to me, even during tough times when I was under assault. Trump was the first person in line defending me. And one of the things I love about that man is that, if you're loyal to him, he will be loyal to you.
Yeah.
I wonder if you have any observations about that, because I always say Donald Trump isn't just a great man, he's a good man.
Yeah. So this is where, look, so I left the White House. I've written 4 books. He's endorsed all 4 books publicly. I was on a reality television show trying to dance. And I'm the first one to admit.
We all remember that one, Sean.
Or rhythm. And Donald Trump, as president of the United States, voted for me, right? The other day I'm in the Oval Office. He reappointed me to the board.
That's a great story.
And the guy literally the night that I got eliminated on the show, I called him in the Oval. He had watched the show. But that's not something that you think that the president of the United States normally does. And here I am, and it was a cool reminder. And then when I was in the Oval with him the other day, he was talking about some of the guests that I had on my show. Now, here's the thing, Steve. He's very laudatory. So he'll say, oh, your show's doing great, Sean. Or, Steve, I love what you're doing on WABC radio. And John Catsimatidis is the best. Okay.
Right.
I thought to myself, okay, I know Trump. He's just saying this. And he's saying, I love watching your show. And I don't think he watches it on YouTube. But my show airs on the First Television Network. And all of a sudden, he starts going through some of the guests. And he says, I saw you had so-and-so on. And I'm like, holy smokes, you do watch. Now, I have the distinct honor of being the lead-in to Bill O'Reilly on the First Television Network. So maybe that had something to do with it. But the bottom line is that he really is loyal to a fault, where everything that I've asked for, said, could you help me with this? Could you support me on this? It's even some of the things that I haven't asked for. He truly is a very, very loyal, and I know the media doesn't want to admit it because it's against the narrative, but you've known this, as you just noted firsthand, when you're loyal to him, he's like a good friend. Now you piss him off, but I don't see why this is different than any other friend that you have. If you crap all over them, as some of the people he has, and that's what they miss. He goes and gives people jobs. There's no gun to their head to take the position. They take it, they crap on him. You think Omarosa, Cliff Sims, Anthony Scaramucci. And of course he's going to get pissed. He gave these people jobs, and they sort of were disloyal.
They betrayed him. Yeah.
Right. And exactly. It's a betrayal. And I think that when you realize that why wouldn't you do that? I don't have anything that dissimilar on a personal level. If somebody sort of goes out publicly and craps all over me, I'm not going to go hang out with them again. I don't know why that's such an odd thing to expect out of President Trump.
So, Sean, you've got tell folks about how they can watch. You've got your YouTube channel, right? That's Sean M. Spicer.
Yeah. So we do a live show called The Morning Meeting every day at 9. It's live. Okay. Anyone from around the world get on, and we take questions about what's going on in politics in the White House. And then my show, the Sean Spicer Show, airs every night at 6 on YouTube. If you're not a YouTube fan, it's on Rumble, and you can get it on Spotify. Obviously, from a revenue standpoint, I'm always a fan of. And then it airs, as I mentioned, at 7 o'clock on the First Television Network, channel 347 on DirecTV.
Did your show, several weeks ago. I was surprised. I got a huge number of people contacted me about, you're on the Sean Spicer Show. That's great. So it's Sean.
I will say this. Sean M. Spicer, and then obviously the website's just SeanSpicer.com, and all that information's there. But we have great guests like you who bring insight, and that's what people look for. The one thing that I say about my show, Steve, is I've been in the game, right? I was White House press secretary. I worked for 13 different members of Congress, 26 years in the military, 6 years at the RNC. So I've seen it. And so when I talk about it, it's not just some hypothesis that I'm floating based on, 3 decades of being in the game.
So I wanted to ask you do you have a few more minutes, Sean? Because this is a fascinating conversation. I don't want to abuse your time,
For
but
you?
okay.
Absolutely.
So I remember you invited me a couple of times to a few of Trump's uh, uh, press conferences when he was first elected president, and I remember I went to some of these in the Rose Garden, and I was so shocked and appalled by the media, the people, the reporters, the people who were covering Trump. Their treatment of Trump was so abusive. I mean, it was disrespectful. Look, I don't have a problem with the media being tough on a president. I think that's what they should do. That's why we have a media. But it was just their contempt for Trump and their abusive, treatment of him. I thought was so outrageous, and I just wonder, A, what your thoughts about that were, and B, do you think that still exists, or is the media treating Trump differently now than they did back then?
Well, they're treating him the same. It's just that I don't think that they have the same antics and ability. Like, there's no Jim Acosta or Brian Karem in the briefing room or April Ryan.
Right.
There's a different crew, but they're still equally as disrespectful.
Right.
Caitlin Collins comes to mind from CNN. That just is really, again, there's this false narrative in the media that Trump people don't like tough questions. You can ask tough questions without being a jerk. And frankly, I would argue that generally speaking, you get a better answer when you're not a jerk. But I think what it comes down to is that they love that confrontation because then they get to put it on YouTube or play it on their CNN show and say, look, I stood up to Trump. It's all a game, and it's all an attempt for them. For as much as they care about quote unquote journalism, it's really about them. And it's about them and their brand and trying to get more clicks and clips and things like that. And when you actually go through the arguments with most of the people in the press briefing room, this whole idea that they're supporters and champions of the First Amendment becomes threadbare, because when you actually ask about doing things that create greater transparency and more press access, they don't want that. What they want is them. So they're okay as long as Caitlin Collins gets her question, or so-and-so from the Washington Post or CBS News. They don't really care about anybody else. As long as that front row gets fed and as they get their clip that they can put on cable or the evening news, they're good.
So I'm talking to Sean Spicer. That Sean Spicer was the first press secretary for Donald Trump when he became president in 2017. You can also reach him at seanspicer.com. Another question I wanted to ask you, Sean, was just about the way Trump makes decisions in the Oval Office. You've been there many, many times. I've been there a few times with him in the Oval Office. It's an interesting management style, I think. And my observation, you've been there so many more times than I have, but, he likes to have people around the table with different opinions. And sometimes he gets criticized for that, but I think it's actually what a good CEO does. And then ultimately he listens to people and he makes the decision. But how would you describe Donald Trump's decision-making process, how it works in the Oval Office?
Yeah, so let me take a step back and explain how it normally historically works and then juxtapose that to how he does it. So normally, if there was a big decision coming on some economic issue, maybe a trade issue or whatever, there's what they call a deputies committee. The deputies committee is all of the number twos, number threes, if you will, from the various relevant cabinet agencies. They would meet. They kind of come up with a scenario or multiple courses of action. Then the principals committee would meet. Those are the national security advisor, the cabinet secretaries, whatever. Then they'd come up with a decision-making memo. They'd present that to the president or the chief of staff, whatever, and the president would sign yay or nay. Right. And that's sort of the stovepipe would operate. What Trump does is he brings a lot of those people into the Oval Office, as you described, and says, OK, Steve, you said that you don't like tariffs, but I know Sean here does. Steve, tell me why I shouldn't do X, Y, Z. And then you would make the case and say, Sean, what do you think about what Steve said? And I'd say, well, I think he's got some good points, but here's where I think I'm a little in disagreement. And Trump would say, OK, Steve, what do you think about his? And as you watch this, and I love it because to me, it's not just a memo that says yes or no, sign off on this, or we've decided on your behalf. It's him hearing tell me your best arguments. Now you critique those best arguments, give me your best argument, then you critique his. And, you see this right now with the discussion about tariffs and trade that you referenced just a minute ago, where you've got Secretary Bessent, Secretary Lutnick, Peter Navarro, Kevin Hassett, all in there. Boom, 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 boom. And then he's listening to each person. He's bouncing them off each other. He's asking each to sort of, and to me, you really then, as a leader, get the best of everybody's take, because you're hearing not just their best positions, but their defense of it, how they're going at the other person. And I actually find it enjoyable, unless I'm the one who's arguing for a position, and I don't want anyone to take it down. But, which I've won some and I've lost some.
So the thing that I found really interesting about Trump in the Times, I would go see him when I had an idea or something that I thought, that he should pursue. And I thought it was very interesting because in most cases with the president, there are going to be 3 or 4 people at the around the table saying, you can't do that. Oh no, it's never been done before. It's unprecedented, that kind of thing. And one of the things I admire about Trump, and I'd like your observation about this, is that, I come in with an idea and he'd say, he'd just make an executive decision. He'd say, I like that, and we're going to do it. And then somebody would say, well, that's never been done before, Mr. President. He said, I don't care. Let's do it. And I don't know if you have any observation about that, but his executive style is get things done.
Yeah. And also, it was kind of funny you're referencing this, because it was what I was talking about with him and some of the senior aides the other day at the White House, which was, the first time around, we would say something and someone would say, oh, historically, that can't be done. It's never been done. Exactly how you just mentioned. And we go, oh, okay. All right. Well, then forget it. And what you're seeing this time is him saying, who cares?
Yeah, right.
It's never been done that way. Okay, great. Then this will be the first. It's never been done that way. Who cares? And it's such a breath of fresh air, because that's what most of these guys are up against. They come into office with a bunch of ideas, how to make things better, more efficient, less duplicitous, whatever. And a bunch of people who, frankly, I think, do well off of the swamp, off of the bureaucracy, sort of say, yeah, you just can't do it. You can't do it. And then what he has learned and his team has learned is, yeah, you can. You just have to have the leadership and the fortitude to make it happen, because you have to be willing to fight that bureaucracy to get your ideas through. If you're not, because they want to stop it. Somebody makes money off of the bureaucracy or the stalemate or the inaction. And what Trump has done, and a whole host of things. I mean, literally down to the minutia of some of the things, how the White House operates, to big, important decisions. I joked at the beginning of this term that I said, if you are using historical norms and Donald Trump in the same sentence, then you really have been asleep.
That's so true. That is true. So I know we're running out of time and talking to the great Sean Spicer, and we just got a couple minutes left, Sean. So 2 last questions I wanted to ask you about. One is we had actually I've had on the show several of Donald Trump's first-term chiefs of staff, all of whom are good friends of mine. And they always say, I could only last in that job about 9 months, and then I was completely exhausted. I just could not keep up with this guy. And people always ask me, is it true that he has he's almost superhuman in this energy level. I've never seen anything like it.
Well, think about this. Last week, he's coming back from that MMA fight in Miami, and he does a press conference. Go look at the timestamp. He goes to the back of Air Force One, brings his granddaughter Kai with him, and at 2:17 a.m., he does a 30-minute press conference. 2:17 a.m. I had been asleep for 4.5 hours, and this guy's holding a press conference. And then I read the pool report. He's up at the golf course at 8. So, look, he's 78 years old. I'm 53. When people joke about keeping up with him, it's for real. Like I want to take a midday nap. That guy just goes and goes and goes. He has, truly is superhuman on that front.
Yeah. Well, Sean, thank you so much for carving out some time on this Easter weekend.
Easter
you are a national asset, my friend. I so much appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
But that brings me to my next guest, Tom Phillipson, who you all know Tom. He was the chief economist for Donald Trump during his first term, was in the Oval Office many times with Donald Trump, much more than I was, and knows how the man operates, gave Donald Trump excellent economic advice in those last 2 or 3 years that he was in office. So, Tom, thanks so much for joining this afternoon.
Good to be with you, Steve.
So, Tom, a lot I want to discuss with you, but can we first start? I do want to ask you about the tariff issue, but first of all, can you tell our audience, because you were in the Oval Office with Donald Trump almost every day when you were running the Council of Economic Advisors for him, what is it like to be with him in the Oval Office? What do you think about the way he operates? I've been in there many times. It's the guy seems to have 4 or 5 things going on at the same time, but he is an amazing decision maker. But what are some of your takeaways with your time in the Oval Office with Donald Trump?
Well, I think my main takeaways is that he kind of liked disagreement among his advisors.
That's so true. Yes.
Yeah, and I think the way I think about it is, think about a court. We have, very biased 2 parties. The defendant and plaintiffs go in with their own evidence, and they shoot down the other side all the time. And out of that comes some kind of truth of this competitive information gathering, essentially.
Right.
And I think it's similar in the debate in the ovals. Like, if you have people all agreeing, you're not going to get as good information as if people disagree, because then you can kind of go through arguments from both sides. And I think,
by the way, Tom, you're making a really important point, because in many I was in the Oval Office a couple times with George Bush, and I've talked to folks who work for other presidents, and it's not always like that. In fact, oftentimes it's just the presidents surrounding themselves with yes men. That's not the case with Trump.
Yeah, and especially it wasn't the case in the first administration. It might be more the case in the second administration.
We'll see,
where people,
Yep.
But I think in the first administration, we have a lot of debates or not, arguments, which I think is healthy. I came from, academia where people are very rude to each other, especially at University of Chicago.
Right.
So I was kind of used to that environment. And a lot of people are kind of uncomfortable, but I think he kind of thrives on it because it does generate better information when people disagree.
So I wanted to ask you about one of your seminal studies that you did. Tom Phillipson, I've neglected to mention, University of Chicago. I think one of the top economists in the country, no question about that. And you did a study 2 or 3 years ago. You and I had a piece in the Wall Street Journal about this, about how the fact that the drug price controls that were imposed by Joe Biden reduced the amount of innovation in the introduction of new drugs and has delayed them. And that you said that this is causing a lot more deaths, as I recall. So can you summarize why drug price controls are a bad idea?
Yeah, essentially innovation is, the biotech sector in the U.S. is amazing. And it's not only because, we have great universities, et cetera, which is partly where most of the innovation comes from, but it's also because we have we have more free market. We don't have a full free market because we have Medicare and Medicaid that control prices quite heavily, and they're half of healthcare spending roughly. Mm-hmm. But we have more free market pricing than other countries. So basically 75% of overall earnings of biopharma comes from the U.S. market, even though we're, 23% of world GDP or something. So we're overrepresented in how much innovative returns we provide essentially to the medical innovation industry across the world, because everyone is selling here. That's the goal. Even if you sit in Sweden, right, you're not innovating for 9 million Swedes. You're innovating essentially for the U.S. market. So the whole world innovation, in all innovation investments across the world depend on the U.S. market. Yes. So when they're coming in and shutting down pricing here, obviously that's going to be a response which is going to damage the future health of, future generations. It might be great for the current seniors. It's Medicare controls prices, but it's certainly not going to be good for the next generation seniors who are going to have, diseases that they can't treat.
So people, I don't want to dwell on this too much, but, when I've talked about this in the past, people will call in and say, well, wait a minute, it's not fair that the people of Mexico or some of the people in Asia or other countries are getting American drugs at a lower price than we pay. And I never know quite how to answer that criticism. What do you say about that?
Well, they have price controls. You have single payers in Europe, and the reason they can do that, and they have actually good reasons for doing it, because if you take a small country like Luxembourg or whatever, they will not affect world returns of a particular product, right? You can literally shut down Luxembourg and nothing happens to medical innovation, because there's such a small share of world sales. And world sales is what drives innovation, essentially. Now you go to the U.S., so for those countries in Europe, small European countries, even though the Europe is roughly the same GDP as U.S. taken together, all European countries, there's a bunch of small countries, so acting unilaterally on their own, they have no trade-off in setting price controls, low prices, because innovation doesn't suffer, because they're not contributing to the, to the world sales. So U.S. is a big country, a rich country. And so price controls in the U.S. are much different or much more harmful to U.S. citizens than, let's say, Swedish controls are to Swedish citizens. So it's very, very easy to understand why they're doing it. But the reason they're lower is because they're basically pricing these products below their value, because it's a government price. It's not a market price.
Is there anything we can do about that?
Well, we tried. We had the most favored nation type of regulations that we were circulating and thinking about in the first administration, meaning you can't set price lower than the U.S. price in other countries or the U.S. Medicare or Medicaid price, essentially, in other countries. There's been some discussions. I think, this comes back to, I think, more unilateral trade agreements with the big markets, Germany, France, and UK. We have to impose some this on them and have some other trade-offs, and tariffs is one, but there's other trade-offs that you can invoke if they're going to have this free riding on the U.S. market.
So I was thinking when you were talking and explaining this that this leads right into the other thing I wanted to talk to you about this afternoon, Tom Phillipson, and that is the fact that Trump has these new tariffs, and that Trump has used tariffs as a kind of bargaining tool and negotiating tool, and you seem like you're comfortable with that. Maybe me a little less so, although I certainly see the objective what Trump is doing. But my question is, Trump could basically say to the Europeans, look, if you're not going to pay for the fair share of these drugs, then we're going to hit you with a tariff. What do you think about something like that?
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's the way I think about this. And you and I probably agree that if he threatens and doesn't use tariffs, that's a great thing. You and I probably agree on that.
Yes.
Right?
For sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
The question is when he uses them. But I mean, there's a lot of sort of Reagan-style economists who are all for, strength or peace through strength in the military space. I think it's a very strong analogy with tariffs, because in the military, we built up nuclear capabilities that we never used in 80 years, but they've been extremely They've been extremely useful. So you didn't use them, just like you're not using certain tariffs. Yeah. You didn't use the nuclear weapons, but because we had them, we got our way in a lot of situations.
Well, it's so funny you should say that, because our mutual friend Arthur Lafroy says you want to spend a little bit more on the defense, than you have to, because the cost of not having enough defense is so high.
But then you go, so we spend 14% of our federal budget, or maybe 3.5% of our GDP on building up this threat that we haven't used. And we used our military, obviously, in other situations, but we haven't used the nuclear capabilities, right? So we built that up. It's very costly to build up that threat. Now you go to tariffs. And tariffs, we already have a working economy, and the threat is you can't trade with us in our great economy. If it's unused, just as nuclear weapons have been unused, it's a great threat. And that's a cheap threat as opposed to a costly threat, which is the military. So it's a very cheap threat.
Yeah. What do you make then of the decision by Donald Trump that was announced yesterday on these tariffs? And our friends at the Wall Street Journal, you're a regular writer in the Wall Street Journal editorial page, as I am. They say, I'm just quoting them, the dumbest trade war in history.
Well, I think if it lasts, that's different. I expect a lot of concessions the next week or month from Mexico and Canada. So this is basically, you got to be serious. You got to have a credible threat. If you just threat people and you don't go through with it, people don't take you seriously, right? So is the threat credible? Here he's showing, yes, it is credible. Oh, he's serious. Now we make some concessions to get rid of this major issue. It's a much bigger issue for them, right, than it is for us. The thing with us is, we're a self-reliant economy compared to many other economies. We trade mostly with ourselves as opposed to with foreigners, which is not true in many other countries.
So I'm agreeing with you almost everything you've said, and so the one thing I guess that bothers me about the latest decision is, and we only have a couple minutes left, Tom. I appreciate you coming on. That's Tom Phillipson of University of Chicago. He was also the senior economist for Donald Trump in his first term. Explain this to me. Why is it that Trump is suggesting higher tariffs on Canada, which is a friendly nation and our northern neighbor, than he is on China, when China is clearly the enemy?
Well, that's a tough call, but also I think he clearly has as a primary purpose to control the border with these tariffs, right? So he's not trying to control the border with Canada, because Canada doesn't sit on our border with China. I mean, China doesn't sit on our border. So these are border issues that is his, that's his number one concern, and that's why he won the election, essentially. So if he can't implement his border policies, our neighbors are not cooperating, then he can't fulfill
so
his
you
main
think that we just in the last 30 seconds we have, so you're okay with what Trump is doing? You think this story will have a happy ending?
I think there were going to be huge concessions because, Mexico, 75% of the exports is to U.S. Canada, I think it's 66% of their exports. They cannot engage in a trade war. There's no way they're going to be, going. Yeah, they can't.
Tom Phillipson, thank you so much for joining us. Great insights on the economy, on trade.
Thanks for listening to More Money with Steve Moore. You can hear More Money with Steve Moore Saturday afternoons at 1. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
77 WABC invites you to a family fun day and softball showdown on July 20th with net proceeds benefiting Shriners Children's. John Sterling will call the game as the FDNY takes on the NYPD with special guests Dwight Gooden, Art Shamsky, 77 WABC hosts including Sid Rosenberg, Anthony Cumia, Lionel, Dominic Carter, and many more. For more info and to buy tickets, go to ShrinersChildren'sChampions.org. That's ShrinersChildren'sChampions.org.
Hello, folks. Larry Kudlow here. Pay attention, because China is leading the largest anti-American alliance since World War II. One that's already dumped U.S. bonds, grabbed 43 million acres of our farmland, and is plotting to dethrone the dollar. That's why IRA and 401k savers are protecting their savings with gold. Please go to freegoldguide.com/Kudlow or just call 800-621-3908 for your free gold guide on how to protect your wealth with gold 100% tax-free.